I didn't plan to leave the house that night. I didn't even plan to argue. You reach a point in a marriage where silence feels safer than confrontation, where you walk around with your shoulders slightly hunched because you're always bracing for disappointment. That's where I was. My name's Darren. I'm 38. Been married to Vanessa for 10 years. We met in college. She was the confident girl with the red lipstick and sharp tongue. I was the guy with a clumsy sense of humor and a knack for fixing things no one asked to be fixed. We made sense once. She liked being seen, and I liked looking at her. She liked control, and I didn't mind being guided. But over the years, God, it wore thin. I don't know when exactly it started to unravel. Maybe it was the third miscarriage. Maybe it was when her mother moved in for 6 months and never said a kind word to me. Maybe it was just time doing what time does, eroding things left unguarded. But by this point, we were more business partners than lovers, managing bills, grocery lists, and pretending the couch wasn't where I usually fell asleep. So that night, it was Thursday. I came home from work late. I manage a warehouse in Glendale. Long hours, lots of noise, and not much gratitude. The kind of job that leaves your hands rough and your back tight. I walked in with takeout, Vanessa's favorite, Thai from that spot on 7th she used to crave. I placed it on the counter and called out, "Brought dinner." No answer. I found her in the living room, half curled into herself, scrolling on her phone, the blue light reflecting off her face like it belonged to someone else. She didn't look up. "I thought you had that meeting tonight," she said without emotion. "Canceled. Thought maybe we could eat together." She didn't smile, just shrugged. I already ate. A lie. The trash was empty. The kitchen untouched. I stood there for a second, trying to will her eyes to meet mine. They didn't. "You want to talk?" I asked quietly. "Anything." That's when she sighed. That heavy, exaggerated sigh that tells you you're already too late. "I don't feel like it," she muttered, eyes still glued to her phone. Something in my chest gave way. Not cracked, not shattered, just bent. Like a beam giving up under weight it's held too long. I nodded, set the bag down, walked into the hallway, and grabbed my keys. No plan, no destination. I just needed air. Needed space from the coldness that had filled every corner of that house. The echo of all the things we stopped saying. But before I could even reach the door, a voice caught me from behind. "Where you going?" It was Krista, her sister. She'd been staying with us for a couple of weeks while sorting out her divorce. Mid-30s, smart-mouthed like Vanessa, but warmer. A lot warmer. I turned. "Just out." She tilted her head. "You okay?" That question. Just those 2 words. I hadn't heard them in months. I almost said nothing. Almost walked right past her. But instead, I shook my head and muttered, "Not really." She looked at me for a second, like she was reading more than just my face. Like she could see through all the quiet misery I wore like an old shirt. Then, softly, "Can I go with you?" And I froze. She wasn't smiling, wasn't flirting, just standing there barefoot, arms crossed, hair a little messy, like she'd been reading or napping or crying. Who knows? But her tone was real, gentle, curious. I hesitated, but then I nodded. "Yeah, sure." We didn't say a word as we climbed into the car. The air between us was thick, but not heavy, just full. I turned on the engine, pulled out of the driveway, and headed nowhere in particular. We drove for about 10 minutes before she finally spoke. "You look like you needed to breathe." I glanced at her. "How could you tell?" She shrugged. "Been there." The radio played some soft acoustic thing. Streetlights streaked across the windshield. I loosened my grip on the steering wheel. "What happened back there?" she asked gently. I let out a slow breath. She didn't feel like talking. Again. Or touching. Or anything. Krista didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't offer platitudes or suggestions. She just nodded like she understood something deeper than I even meant to say. We ended up at this overlook just past the loop, where the city lights sit below you like a string of scattered gems. I'd come here a few times alone, back when I was younger, dumber, hopeful. It felt weird being here now. We sat there in the parked car, windows slightly cracked, silence stretching between us like a comfortable blanket. "She's been gone a while, hasn't she?" Krista asked, not looking at me. "Yeah," I said. "Longer than either of us wants to admit." "She doesn't see you anymore." I swallowed. "No, not really." She turned then, finally meeting my eyes. "Well, I do." I didn't know what to say. Didn't trust what I was hearing. Or maybe I just didn't trust myself to believe it. "It's not. I'm not looking for anything," I said quickly, almost clumsily. I just needed someone to sit beside you when everything feels cold, she finished. I get it. She leaned back into the seat, crossed her legs beneath her, let her head rest against the window. We stayed there for maybe an hour. No touching, no grand confessions. Just two people sharing a quiet escape from the lives that made them feel invisible. Eventually, I turned the car back on and drove home. She didn't ask for music. I didn't turn on the lights. When we pulled into the driveway, she reached for the handle, paused, and said without looking at me, "Anytime you need to breathe again, you don't have to do it alone." And then she was gone, back into the house, back into whatever role she played in the dysfunction we all pretended wasn't happening. I sat in the car for another minute, hands still on the wheel. My wife was upstairs, probably asleep or pretending to be. But for once, the passenger seat hadn't felt empty. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen with a mug of black coffee, staring out the window like it held answers. It didn't. Just the same backyard we stopped tending together, a wilted flower bed, and the same worn swing we never got around to fixing. Vanessa walked in, hair tied up, sleep still in her eyes, wearing the faded t-shirt I bought her on our honeymoon in Tulum. She didn't look at me. She just opened the fridge, grabbed a yogurt, and said, "You left last night." Not a question, just a cold observation, like I'd left the faucet running. "I did," I said quietly. She nodded, peeled back the yogurt lid, tossed it on the counter. "You always make things dramatic." That one cut. I almost said something. Almost reminded her that silent rejection night after night didn't feel much like peace. But I didn't have the energy for another round of pretending we were still trying. I left the mug in the sink and walked out. That whole day at work, I couldn't stop thinking about the night before, not in the way you think. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't scandalous. It was real. Krista didn't say much, but what she said stuck. "I see you. You don't realize how much you need to be seen until you've been invisible for too long." That evening, I came home later than usual. Vanessa was in the bedroom with the door shut. I didn't knock. I found Krista in the living room, curled up with a book. She looked up, met my eyes for a split second, then went back to her page. I stood there unsure. Then I said, "Want to get out of here again?" She didn't answer right away, just closed her book, slid her feet into sandals, and grabbed a hoodie. We didn't drive far, just to that same overlook. The sky was clearer than the night before. You could see every pinprick of light in the sky, and the city looked soft from a distance, like all its noise had been hushed for us. "Why did you ask to come with me?" I finally asked. She didn't look at me. "Because I know what it's like to feel like a ghost in your own marriage." "James?" I asked her ex. She nodded. "He used to tell me I was lucky to be married to someone so successful. He forgot I needed more than credit card statements to feel loved." We sat in silence again, but it wasn't awkward. It was almost like a relief, to sit next to someone who didn't ask you to explain your sadness. She turned to me, and for the first time, there was this softness in her voice that almost broke me. "I've watched how she talks to you," she said. "How she looks through you. You haven't deserved that for a long time." My throat tightened. I didn't want to cry, didn't want to fall apart in front of someone who didn't ask for this weight. But something inside me cracked open. I thought if I just stayed kind, I whispered, if I kept showing up, loving her through it, she'd come back. Krista leaned her head against the seat and looked straight ahead. I used to think that too. But love doesn't work like gravity. It doesn't always pull people back. I wanted to reach for her hand. I didn't. I wanted to say something brave. I didn't. Instead, I asked the only thing I had the courage to say. "Can we just sit here? Not say anything. Just sit." She nodded. And so we did. That night, when we returned, Vanessa was in the kitchen. She looked at me. Really looked. First time in weeks. "Where were you?" I didn't lie. I went out. Alone. I paused. Krista stood behind me in the doorway. She didn't shrink away. Didn't try to hide. I turned back to Vanessa and said, "No." Vanessa's face changed. The kind of change that doesn't show up all at once, but in layers. Confusion. Then anger. Then something like fear. "You too?" she started, but couldn't finish. "No," I said quickly. "Not like that." But then, after a breath, I added, "But something's changing, whether you want to admit it or not." Krista disappeared down the hall. Vanessa stared at me for a long time. And for the first time since we said, "I do," I saw it in her eyes. Not hatred, not blame, but the realization that she had finally lost something. The next few days passed like we were strangers again. Krista didn't ride with me anymore. She kept to herself. Vanessa walked quieter, cooked more, cleaned, asked questions she hadn't asked in years, about my day, my work, my plans. It was like watching someone try to rebuild a bridge over a river that had already changed its course. One night, a week after that last drive, Krista knocked on the door of the garage where I was fixing the mower. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "You?" She smiled a little. "Leaving tomorrow." I stopped what I was doing. "Where to?" "Back to my apartment. Or what's left of it." I wanted to ask her to stay, but that wouldn't be fair. Not to her. Not yet. She stepped forward, closer than she had before. Then she said, "Whatever happens with her, don't forget how you felt when you weren't alone in that car." I met her eyes. "I won't." She leaned in, kissed me on the cheek, slow, lingering, warm, then walked away. That night, Vanessa sat beside me on the couch. First time in months. She reached for my hand, and I let her. But in my mind, I was back in that car. Not because Krista said something perfect, not because she wanted something from me, but because, for the first time in a long time, someone had simply chosen to sit with me in the dark. No conditions, no expectations, just presence. And sometimes, that's all it takes to wake a man up from the quiet death of being unseen.